How's it going, Jack Tackers, and welcome back to another video for you guys. Today I'm going to be ranking all 12 Christopher Nolan films from the worst to the best. With the release of Oppenheimer earlier this month, we got to do an updated Nolan ranking. I did one when Tenet came out back in 2020, and now that we got a new movie, we got to, just update the ranking. And if you know anything about me, you'll know that Christopher Nolan is my all-time favorite director. He's the GOAT. He's made a bunch of fantastic movies, which we'll talk about. And today's actually his birthday, so that's kind of a bit of a coincidence I chose to do this video. I didn't realize until I started putting the video together. But yeah, happy birthday, Nolan. He's amazing. And I should mention and kind of preface this ranking with the fact that he's never made a bad movie. In my opinion, I like all of his films, so just keep that in mind as we go through this ranking, because I say worst to best, but there's not really a worst movie. It's just my least favorite, I guess you could say. But yeah, with that being said, let's just jump on into this ranking. Starting off at number 12, my least favorite Christopher Nolan movie is Insomnia. And Al Pacino and Robin Williams are, without a doubt, the best thing about this movie. They have a great, really interesting dynamic in the film. I love what they do with those characters. I also like the Alaskan setting. However, this movie kind of struggles to pull me in, unlike some of Nolan's other works. Also, this is the only movie in Nolan's filmography in which he doesn't have an official writing credit for. I believe he wrote the final draft of the screenplay, but I don't know, I think that's interesting to mention, simply because I feel like sometimes this movie could have been a bit better executed overall. And my main issue with the film is that it feels a little too generic at times for Christopher Nolan. I've seen a lot of other, I guess you would say, psychological thrillers with a detective and, whatnot. And there's just better movies that are similar to this out there. And maybe the Norwegian version of the film that came out in, I think, 1997 is better than this, because this is actually a remake of a movie that already existed. So that's what I mean. It just feels like a really weird project for Nolan to tackle, and it kind of doesn't feel, I guess, super original maybe. But I don't know. It's still fine, has its moments, but it's definitely my least favorite. Anyways, moving on to number 11, I have Following, Nolan's first movie, one that is often forgotten because, well, it kind of feels amateur. I mean, it's competently made. It just, for Nolan standards, it's his first movie, so it's going to feel a little, I guess, amateur, you would say. And I've seen just so many Nolan rankings where this is in last place. I feel like everyone puts this in last place, but I think the fact that it is his first movie, that's kind of the charm of the film for me, and seeing such early work from him, it's quite the treat, actually. It makes me enjoy the film a fair amount, to be honest, and I actually just enjoy the plot of this film. I think it's kind of interesting. Well, that is until about halfway through the movie where things kind of peter off a bit and it isn't quite as engaging anymore. So I guess that's kind of my main issue with the movie. It's not paced very well, and that's a major issue because the movie is only a little over an hour long. So the fact that it's not paced well, yikes. If this was a short film that was maybe 20 minutes long, I think it would be a much more well-rounded story. But yeah, I like this movie, but it's definitely got to go towards the bottom for me. Anyways, moving on to number 10, I have Tenet. See what I did there? Okay, anyway. To be honest, this movie has kind of dipped a little since last ranking. Used to be a bit higher. But I think this just feels like Christopher Nolan trying a little too hard to confuse and bend people's minds. And I think this film's too confusing for its own good at times. And for that reason, I find it kind of hard to be invested in the plot. And I know this has been said quite a few times at this point, but there's also some audio issues with the movie. Sometimes I just can't hear what the hell people are saying. However, this movie looks fantastic. Cinematography, the effects, amazing action set pieces. It is a spectacle of a movie, and that's easily the best thing about it. And I don't know, for some reason, I just kind of feel like this is a worse version of Inception. I'm just going to say it. That's an oversimplification, but it's a science fiction heist movie, and it feels like Nolan just, again, trying too hard. But I do have some fun with it. It's got great performances, But if I want to get my mind blown, this wouldn't really be my go-to film. So there you go. Anyways, moving on to number 9, I have Dunkirk. And this movie's actually moved up a bit since last ranking because this is just, well, a really well put together war film. And a few years ago in my last ranking, when I was talking about this movie, I said I wasn't the biggest fan of war movies. And I kind of still hold that sentiment a little bit, but I've seen a lot more war films since that, and I've rewatched Dunkirk. And I do realize just how tightly written and well executed this movie is. It doesn't meander, gets right to the point. And I think for a war movie, it's kind of short, actually. I think it's under 2 hours. And honestly, the best thing about the film is that it's just very immersive. And it feels like a movie that's just like dropped you into World War II. And I love that. Has a lot of great sequences, super intense, actually. And my main problem with the film, I would say the characters can be kind of hit or miss for me. And I found myself caring for some. Don't get me wrong, there's some decent characters in here. But others, I was a little disinterested in. So, I don't know, it's a bit of a shame, but I can kind of look past it. It's a solid flick overall, but it just comes down to the fact that the movies above this one, I enjoy more. But, it's solid for sure. Anyways, moving on to number 8, I have Memento. And this is one of Nolan's more, I guess, small-scale movies, but it's paired with his incredible writing and story structure that kind of plays into these sort of mind-bending moments. Like, this isn't about people hopping into other people's dreams or going into outer space, getting sucked into a black hole or something big and crazy like that. It's just really about this guy who has memory loss and is trying to find who killed his wife. And yes, the first time I saw this movie, I was utterly confused, but when you revisit it a little more, you realize just how good this movie is. And in my opinion, this is Nolan's true first film. I mean, obviously Following is, but this was kind of his first hit. And, you got Guy Pearce in this movie. He's terrific, plays the role to perfection. And the entire unraveling of this movie is like a puzzle. It constantly keeps you guessing, and I think that's something I really enjoy about this movie. It's incredibly engaging, asks for the audience to really pay attention to every little detail, and it's just an extremely clever movie, pretty riveting overall. And I just love the way Nolan plays with kind of that non-linear storytelling in here, and how by the end, there's like this full circle moment that just makes you rethink the entire film and how you view it. And quite frankly, at this point in the list, it gets really tricky for me determining which movies should go where. So if this does feel a little low, it's definitely not because I dislike it, but at the end of the day, Nolan has just made so many great classic movies, in my opinion, so that's why it's only number 8. Anyways, moving on to number 7, I have The Prestige. Nolan's most underrated movie. I'll say it. And I don't know if it's because it's kind of sandwiched between Batman Begins and Dark Knight, if that has something to do with it. Probably not, but I don't know. It just doesn't quite get the credit it deserves. And, any movie with 2 Christian Bales I'm going to love. But in all seriousness, he's amazing here. I need Nolan and Bale to make another movie together. Last time they worked together was for The Dark Knight Rises, I guess. So I don't know. I would like to see another pairing with those two. But of course, you also have Hugh Jackman in this movie. He's another great thing about the film. Hugh Jackman's character and Christian Bale's character just kind of have this really entertaining back and forth. And it's kind of the core of the movie, in my opinion. And it's also what I feel like Insomnia wanted to do, at least with the cat and mouse kind of thing. But this movie pulls it off a lot better. This whole movie's just, it's very intricate, it's well crafted, more so than Memento, in my opinion. And I think the reason I like it more than Memento is due to the fact this movie's a bit of a period piece. It actually takes place in, I think, the 1890s. Yeah, something like that. So I think that adds a bit of a different flair to the movie. Lots of good twists in here as well. And it's just an entertaining movie. It's incredibly, mysterious. But weirdly enough, I don't even think this is Nolan at his very best, of course, why it's only ranked at number 7. But good movie. And from here on out, these top 6, oh boy. I mean, these are just like some all-time favorites, I think, at this point for me. And I love a lot of these movies. Well, I've pretty much liked all these movies on this list, of course, but this is where it gets really difficult for me, just in terms of, the ranking. But at number 6, I have Inception. And outside of the Dark Knight trilogy, it's probably the film Nolan is most known for. It's one of his most popular movies, and for good reason. I really love Inception, mainly because it has such an interesting concept that you can immediately latch onto, and it takes you on such a fun adventure. It's an incredible experience. It's got great action set pieces paired with brilliant VFX work, amazing cinematography, and just a bunch of mind-bending sequences that kind of leave your jaw on the floor. And yeah, this is like, I feel like what Tenet was trying to pull off, and it didn't come close to the level Inception got to for me. And I don't know, I just think the core of the story as well, this is another thing I'll touch on, that being the character of Dom Cobb. He's trying to get over the death of his wife, wanted to be reunited with his kids, and that leads to some very emotional moments. And the ending is ambiguous. I love that. So to me, that is kind of what Tenet was missing, that emotion. It doesn't quite, it has it a little bit, but it doesn't really quite have that emotional layer to it that Inception has. And Hans Zimmer's score, holy crap. I mean, it is without a doubt some of his best work. Just listen to Time. I mean, you know what I'm talking about if you've seen this movie, the one that plays at the end of the movie. Yo, that is one of the best film scores of all time. I'm not even joking. And I just think that's kind of that emotion that you feel when Cobb actually gets back to his kids and you like don't know if he's still in the dream world or not. It's like, yo, that's what Tenet's missing for me. And I don't want to keep comparing Inception and Tenet, but they're similar to me. And they're also both kind of Nolan's like version of a James Bond movie in many ways. Like Inception has a lot of moments where it kind of feels like a James Bond film, and Tenet more so I would say is kind of, Nolan's version of a James Bond movie. And I think there's some similarities between the two. I mean, there just are, quite frankly. But Inception is definitely better, and I love it. But moving on to the top 5, at number 5, sure enough, I have Oppenheimer. Did a whole review for this movie, like 15 minutes long, so if you want a bit more in-depth thoughts that I have for this movie, go check out that review. It's on the channel. But long story short, Cillian Murphy and the rest of the cast, RDJ, holy moly. I mean, they're amazing. I hope they get nominated. And honestly, I think Cillian Murphy should just win Best Actor. And it's just a thought-provoking movie, very interesting. You got Ludwig Göransson's score as well. Can You Hear the Music? I've been listening to that nonstop ever since I saw the movie. It's an intense film. I will say, a little long, but it's still very engaging throughout. Like, I was still pretty much on the edge of my seat. And I don't know, a lot of the moments in this movie, I felt like my body was vibrating. The scene where they actually test the atomic bomb is just amazing and so suspenseful. Also a very important movie, I feel like. Everyone should see this. Very haunting. And the way this movie ends just really, thought-provoking. Leaves you in this kind of headspace where you just feel so scared, quite frankly. And it's a great movie. Love it. And it's entered the top 5 Nolan movies for me. Can you believe it? But I've only seen it once, so it could, I don't know. Well, it could slip down a little, but I don't know. Anyways, moving on to number 4, I have Interstellar. And I just love space kind of science fiction movies, and this is such a cool film. It kind of feels like Nolan's tribute to 2001: A Space Odyssey. And we know Christopher Nolan is a fan of Kubrick films, so I'm pretty sure it is. And I kind of love that element to it. I also love the emotion packed into this movie, and in my opinion, this is probably Matthew McConaughey's best performance, or at least my favorite of his. Either that or his performance in True Detective Season 1, because that is another legendary Matthew McConaughey performance. I mean, he has a lot of them, but like the whole scene, you know the scene, "Don't let me leave, Murph." Oh, man. And also the scene where he's reacting to the videos of his daughter getting older, and just, dude, I mean, it's insane. And, you got some great cinematography in this movie. It's a gorgeous film. And I'll talk about Hans Zimmer's score again. Wow. That moment where the docking scene is phenomenal. That's one of the most iconic scenes in the movie. And that music that's playing in that scene is just crazy. I love the message of this film as well. It's kind of just about love, ultimately. And a bunch of other things as well, but that's my interpretation of it. And it's a special movie for sure. I enjoy it. It's really good. But we still got 3 movies to talk about. And oh yeah, it's the Dark Knight trilogy. Listen, I know not many people would put the trilogy as the top 3, but I love Batman, and these movies are just, I kind of view them as one film. And I know that might sound crazy to some people, but in what order would I rank the Dark Knight trilogy? Well, let's get into it. At number 3, I have The Dark Knight Rises. And I know most people would put this movie very low in their ranking for Nolan films. I just got to disagree. I love this movie. It's a great conclusion to the trilogy. I love Bane. I love how large scale and epic this movie feels. I mean, Gotham City is truly at stake in this movie. And it's just a great ending for Bruce's character as well. I love the scene at the end where you see Alfred, actually see Bruce get the kind of peaceful life and happy ending that he's always deserved. And it's brilliant. I love this movie. And I know there's some goofy moments in here. Talia's death was silly, and some people think there's, I don't know, maybe continuity errors. Like, how did Bruce get back to Gotham so fast after he just got out of the Lazarus pit? Or whatever. Is it the Lazarus pit? Kind of. The pit. And it's like, I don't care. It's like, I really don't. I don't know what to tell you. I think it's a solid movie. It's awesome. I love it. And I don't know. Anyways, moving on to number 2, I have Batman Begins. And this is a perfect origin story. And I just love how this is a very grounded and realistic interpretation of Batman. And it's kind of what Batman 89 did, but takes it to another level. It's very dark. And yeah, it just feels really grounded in reality. And I like that. That's what I like about this whole trilogy. And that's why I respect Nolan so well, because ultimately the Dark Knight trilogy is like responsible for me getting into superhero movies and superheroes and comics and just all that, because I always thought superheroes were goofy, And you could say that Bale's Batman voice is kind of goofy and whatnot, and there's some silly moments here and there, but it takes itself seriously. And that's something I had never really seen in a superhero movie until I watched this. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in The Dark Knight. But yeah, Batman Begins, I love it. It's really good. I don't really have anything to say about it. I feel like I've talked about it a lot on this channel as well, and on Letterboxd and whatnot. Like, again, if you know anything about me, you know I love these movies, so I feel like I don't really have to explain them that much. But anyway, yeah, at number 1, The Dark Knight. Okay, there's nothing to say. I mean, I've made countless reviews of this movie. It's a masterpiece. It's my favorite movie of all time. I don't know. Going back to what I was saying earlier, it's kind of responsible for me liking superhero movies. And I never could take superheroes seriously. And to see that Nolan created this crime drama with Batman and made it feel real and like it was taking itself seriously, I loved it. And it blew my mind when I saw it when I was, I don't know how old I was, but pretty young probably. And I was like, whoa, okay, so superheroes aren't goofy, which is why I don't really like, some of the stuff James Gunn does with, the comic book genre, comic book movie genre, I guess you could say. Because it's too silly sometimes. I do like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and let's not get into all that, but it's just sometimes I like serious stuff, and that's what The Dark Knight is for me, and it represents, the kind of game changer for superhero movies and just movies in general. And it's a very special movie to me. But yeah, there's not really much I have to say about it, so there you go. Anyways, that's all 12 Christopher Nolan movies ranked from the quote-unquote worst to the best. And I'm sure I have a few hot takes in here, but I don't really give a shit. So post your thoughts and comments on this ranking down below, and let me hear your ranking of all the Christopher Nolan movies. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say, and where you would rank what, because I've seen a lot of, I guess, different Nolan rankings, but yeah, just curious to see what you guys have to say. So yeah, post your thoughts and comments down below. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, check out my Letterboxd and Twitter in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.